Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of football's most mysterious and controversial secrets. What if I told you there's a hidden rule in football that allows a player to walk away from his contract, even if the club doesn't want to sell him? A rule so powerful it shook FIFA, sent shockwaves through the transfer market, made clubs furious, and gave football agents a brand new weapon in negotiations. This secret rule is called Article 17 of the FIFA regulations on the status and transfer of players. It's the rule that changed how contracts are viewed in modern football. A rule that clubs fear, agents carefully study, and players dream about when they feel trapped. By the end of this video, you won't just understand Article 17, you'll see why it's one of the most controversial and important tools in football transfer history. But before we get started, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the hidden side of football. Alright, let's begin. What is Article 17? Let's start simple. What exactly does this rule say? Article 17 deals with the consequences of terminating a football contract without just cause. In other words, if a player decides to walk away from his contract before it ends, this article explains what happens next. Here's the key detail. Under FIFA's rules, once a player has completed what's called the protected period, that's usually 3 years in a long-term contract, he can terminate his deal by paying compensation to the club. That compensation is usually based on his remaining salary and his market value. This means that contracts in football aren't as unbreakable as many fans think. Players are expected to respect them, yes, but Article 17 gives them an escape hatch. A legal way out, almost like a hidden buyout clause if the right conditions are met. That's why agents and lawyers love this rule. It gives their clients leverage. For the first time, players had a way to take back control of their careers instead of being fully at the mercy of clubs. But here's why it's controversial. Clubs spend millions on wages, transfers, and contracts. And if a player suddenly uses Article 17, the club risks losing him for much less than what they think he's worth. And in 2006, one Scottish defender made history by putting this rule to the test. His case would give Article 17 its famous nickname, the Webster ruling. The Andy Webster case. Let's rewind to 2006. Andy Webster was a Scottish defender playing for Hearts in the Scottish Premier League. He had signed a long-term contract, but partway through, he wanted to leave. Hearts refused to sell him. That's when Webster and his representatives turned to Article 17. After completing the protected period in his deal, he argued that he had the right to walk away if he paid compensation. The case went to FIFA's Dispute Resolution Chamber, and then eventually to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, or CASAS. The ruling? Webster was allowed to terminate his contract by paying only the value of his remaining wages. This absolutely shocked the football world. Imagine your club values you at millions of pounds, but suddenly you can walk away for just a fraction of that amount. The Webster ruling set a precedent. For the first time ever, a player had legally escaped a contract using Article 17. Clubs panicked, agents celebrated, and FIFA realized they might have opened a Pandora's box. In the end, Webster joined Wigan Athletic in England. He wasn't a superstar, but his case became legendary. Every agent started studying Article 17 as a weapon they could use in transfer talks. But 1 year later, another case would test the limits of this rule, and this time, things got much more complicated. The Matusalem case. In 2007, a Brazilian midfielder named Francilino Matusalem was playing for Shakhtar Donetsk in Ukraine. He had signed a long-term deal, but after 3 years, he wanted to move to Spain and play for Real Zaragoza. Shakhtar refused. So, Matusalem invoked Article 17, just like Andy Webster had. He terminated his contract, joined Zaragoza, and believed he only had to pay compensation based on his remaining wages. But this time, the story didn't end so easily. Shakhtar fought back hard. They argued that losing a key player like Matusalem wasn't just about lost wages, it caused far bigger financial damage to the club. The case went all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and this time, the decision was very different. CAS ruled that Matusalem and Zaragoza had to pay Shakhtar 11.9 million euros in damages. The message was clear. Article 17 could still free a player, but it wouldn't always be cheap. If the player was valuable, the compensation could be massive. The Webster case had shown that Article 17 could break contracts. The Matusalem case showed that it could also cost a fortune. Since then, very few players have actually dared to use it. The financial risk is simply too high. Still, agents keep it in their back pocket, ready to pull out when everything else fails. The legacy of Article 17. So, what does Article 17 mean for modern football? First, it shifted the balance of power. Before this rule, clubs had almost total control. Now, players have at least some legal way to take back control if they're willing to pay. Second, it changed how contracts are written. Agents carefully study the protected period, knowing that once it ends, Article 17 could be an option. Third, it influenced transfer strategies. Clubs now insert special clauses, higher wages, or even renegotiate early to avoid a player walking away. And finally, Article 17 became a psychological tool. Even if a player never actually uses it, the threat alone can push a club to negotiate more fairly. In other words, Article 17 may not be used often, but it's always there, shaping the transfer market quietly in the background. To wrap it up, Article 17 remains one of football's most fascinating and controversial rules. The Webster ruling showed that a player could walk away with minimal compensation. The Matusalem case showed that it could also cost millions. And today, the rule stands as a quiet weapon in the world of football transfers, rarely used, but always respected. Because in football, power isn't just on the pitch. It's in contracts, negotiations, and sometimes even the courtroom. So, what do you think? Should players have the right to walk away? Or should clubs always have the final say? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your opinion. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden side of football, don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications. There are so many more stories like this waiting to be uncovered. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.